California was just noted to be the number 50 out of 50 states for quality of life. And a report.
Yeah, I'm not sure. When
Oh,
I
I
see
believe
those,
that.
Really?
Oh, definitely.
Our weather's too nice.
Weather's wonderful, but it's hard to enjoy it if you're working 2 or 3 jobs to make a living. That's the problem. And that's true, by the way.
Yeah,
You know, people who live along the coast, you know, we kind of take it for granted that, you know, we can afford the houses and things like that. You get inland a little bit in California, you're finding unemployment levels that are very high. You're finding people having to work 2 and 3 jobs in order to make a go of life here. You know, when you have a house that costs $500,000 or $1 million when it would be half that in Texas, you know, you start to wonder, what am I doing in this wonderful weather when I can't even enjoy it?
Let's say housing prices, and I'll be talking about that with another guest later today, but
yeah.
What do you do about it? Especially when you got foreign money coming in, buying up homes. How do you
You got to build more homes, and the Democrats' answer is, you know, subsidies, and that's going to help a few hundred people at most. You know, the numbers they're talking about. They're even talking about a $5 billion housing bond. That'll maybe build 10,000, 20,000 homes, if that. You know, we're talking 3 million homes we need in the next 10 years. The only way we're going to do that is with the private sector. We got to build a lot more supply of homes.
Yeah, I think a $500 million housing bond, right?
No, it was a $5 billion.
Oh, $5 billion.
Oh, they were talking about $5 billion, which, by the way, California has already got $250 billion in bond and indebtedness, which is on top of the $1 trillion unfunded pension debt. So, I mean, this state has a lot of debt.
Okay.
I'd prefer to see the private sector. We have to reform CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act. How is that going to happen when the environmental lobbyists have such control of Sacramento? I mean, that's.
How do you respond to people that say we have to have a strong environmental lobby
because
we want to protect the environment?
We do, but it's gone way overboard. It's gone way overboard. The typical housing project takes 4 to 8 years to get approved. I mean, you're talking about consultants and consultants and consultants. You're talking about litigation. You can bring litigation under CEQA to basically extort higher wages, which is what a lot of unions do. It's used by developers to limit other developers from, you know, competing. I mean, it's been stretched way beyond what it was
by the way,
intended to be.
somewhat related to it, because I think it gets into the heavy regulation, both federal level, but especially state level. Did you see that item about the feral cattle that are destroying the canyons in San Bernardino? They're running wild.
Yeah.
And they can't do anything about it because they've got all these regulations to deal with. I think there's a lot of people that could figure out a real simple solution to too many feral cattle running around. And these are, you know, destroying the environment there.
Is that really?
Is you just tell the hunters they can
go in open season.
Yeah.
You know, there's a lot of
you could
things.
solve it. I've had friends tell me you could solve it in one afternoon, but California has been unable to solve it for months now.
Well, it's like a lot of things that aren't solved in California, and a lot of it is because of the lobbyists that control Sacramento. I mean, that's the reason the environmental laws are the way they are, because there's lobbyists there that get paid to make sure that they're as strict as possible. It's the reason we don't have water. I met with a bunch of growers yesterday near Bakersfield who are just telling me, you know, so many small farmers have gone out of business. I mean, the number of growers that have gone out of business in the last 10 years is stunning, Rick. And this state gets huge foreign exchange, huge trading with our agricultural products. We're the largest cattle state in the country. We're the largest dairy state. Our dairy business is probably bigger than Wisconsin and Vermont combined. Yet, time and again, the Sacramento politicians listen to the environmental lobbyists and they throw the farmers under the bus and they don't give them allocations of water. Well, we can have enough water. I mean, we may have to do desalination. We may have to do some more reservoir building. We certainly should do a lot more conservation. But the politicians, they don't want to solve some of these problems. They want to give in to one interest group or another.
One other thing I wanted to touch with you on is here you are, a Chicago transplant running for governor.
Yeah.
John Chung is a Chicago transplant, the state treasurer.
Running
He's
for governor.
running for governor. And his classmate in Chicago in high school. They ran as a ticket for the student council. Is Dave Jones, our state insurance commissioner. So, are you part of a Cook County plot to take over the state of California?
No, there's no cabal or Cook County plot. I mean, actually, obviously, those two are Democrats. I'm a Republican. But it's funny. It's just a coincidence that we all grew up within a few miles of each other, and so.
Yeah, you said that. Did you know growing
No,
up?
they're younger than I am. I'm 62.
But
and
you guys both.
mid-50s.
So two state officials and one yourself, who's running for governor,
Yeah.
all grew up within a very like 2 miles of each
Two
other?
or 3 miles of each
3
other.
miles
It's
of each other.
amazing.
Wow.
What a coincidence.
And of course, Barack Obama. Well, he didn't grow up there, but
No, he grew up in Hawaii.
But he taught at University of Illinois, which isn't too far from.
Well, I actually taught at the University of Chicago,
I'm sorry.
which
You
is
were-
where
you're
I was
Chicago.
born, by
Yeah.
the way. I was born.
You were born at the
at the
hospital.
Chicago Line and Hospital, University
Oh,
of
wow.
Chicago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
My mom lived on the south side. My grandmother, who worked at Marshall Fields, by the way, for 40 years. She retired from, remember Marshall Fields?
Yes, absolutely.
My grandmother worked at Marshall Fields for 40 years.
In fact, I thought it was telling when, who was it that took over Marshall Fields?
Macy's.
When Macy's, and when here in California they took over stores and everybody,
Right.
shrugged or whatever.
Not a big deal.
In Chicago,
Oh, it
you
was a
try to
big
take
deal.
over Marshall Field, you would have thought the British had come to invade the United States again.
Well, as you might remember, I owned Jay's Potato Chips.
That's right, Jay's, a famous brand in Chicago, Jay's. I didn't know you owned it.
I
You
owned it.
owned
I
Jay's
represented the
Potato-
Jap family, and I sold the company to Borden for $30 million. 7 years later, after Borden ran into the ground, I bought it back. I personally bought it back for $10 million.
Now, is the brand still there? Or is Jay's?
Yeah, but the company went out of business after I sold it. I sold it to the management after I did the turnaround. We turned it around from a $17 million loss to a $3 million profit.
And then
in
the
1
guy
year.
screwed it up that you sold it to?
No, the government drove them out of business. If you remember the product, it was made with pure corn oil. Do you remember the product?
I just remember I ate way too many of them
Me
growing
too.
up. Is
Me
all
too.
I,
But it was made with corn oil. And in the 90s, I sold it to the management in 95 or 96. And then Bill Clinton got together with Bob Dole, and they decided to make ethanol something you put in your tank. Well, that was made from corn, if you remember.
Yeah.
Still is.
So the price went.
The price of corn oil shot through the roof, drove the company out of business.
Wow.
All they ever used was corn.
Wow.
Their whole entire product was based on the corn
And they
taste.
couldn't just switch.
They couldn't switch to sunflower oil because Frito-Lay uses sunflower or cottonseed oil or other kind of vegetable oils, but Jay's was all corn oil, which doesn't have cholesterol.
Okay. Listen, one other thing we got to ask you is it's a hot topic here in California now is marijuana. How do you feel about legalization?
I'm not in favor of legalization.
You're
of
not?
marijuana. No, I'm not.
You're a libertarian guy, I thought.
No, not at all. No, I don't believe we should have legalized marijuana. I think we did it for revenue purposes. I don't think we should legalize prostitution either. I think there's reasons to have standards. I don't think we should make more drugs legal. It's a gateway drug as far as I'm concerned. Having said that, I don't want to put users in jail either. I think that's stupid. I think we ought to do something similar to what Portugal does, which is they basically, users who abuse it and are found to drive or commit other crimes with marijuana usage end up going to hospitals and getting cured of their substance abuse issues.
What if you're just using it casually?
Yeah, I think.
Well, that sounds like legalization then.
Prosecutorial
obviously
discretion.
You can't drive drunk. You can't drive
I
high.
think it's different to make it totally legal, because I think what ends up happening with people who sell it is, and because California is taxing it. See, the reason they've legalized it was to tax it to death, because they need the revenue for the outrageous pensions that they
So
promise
if you become
people.
governor, what would you do about it's been passed, the voters?
Oh,
have
there's nothing I
approved it.
can do about it. I mean, and it's probably not on the top list of things I'm going to tackle. I mean, we've got a pension
So
debt.
would you faithfully enforce the laws of
course.
marijuana and allow people
Of course.
to smoke marijuana?
Of course.
But you're against it. But
I'm not
you're
in
just,
favor of it, and if I have anything to say about it, I would, maybe someday
okay.
do something about it. But it's not a top issue for me. We've got a lot of other existential issues. I mean,
You might even like the revenue at some point if you were.
well, the
governor.
trouble is that they're taxing it so highly, and I've heard this from a lot of people who are even thinking about getting into business. They're taxing it so highly that there's still going to be a substantial black market, and that's what's happened, by the way, in Colorado. I mean, they're taxing it quite heavily, and there still is a substantial black
So maybe
market.
you would lower the taxes if you were.
Well, I'm going to lower all taxes across the board, Rick, because government is way too fat and lazy and incompetent and inefficient in California.
Okay.
And I run my businesses very efficiently. So believe me, our budget is easily 30 to 40% too high. And frankly, part of that is the housing crisis. You know, I was just reading a study that was just published. I forget who did the study, but it compared teachers' salaries in the 50 states based upon the cost of living. California pays its teachers an average of $72,000 a year, but if you adjusted it for the cost of living, it's only $57,000. So it's in the middle of the stack of states when you compare it. So think about that. Our average salary for teachers is easily $15,000. It's 20% higher than it should be because of the cost of living. And the cost of living, I'm telling you right now, a good chunk of that is housing. Obviously, it's also gasoline and water and electricity, but a big chunk of it is housing. And if we can bring down the cost of housing, I think we can bring down salaries in California. And if we can bring down salaries in California, we can also have lower taxes and a lower budget.